A new national poll of the Democratic presidential primary shows Joe Biden and Senator Elizabeth Warren separating themselves from the rest of the field. Biden still holds the lead with 31%. Warren has 25% support. We should, of course, remind our viewers there is no national primary. However, this latest data does provide some insight into key demographics within the Democratic electorate. Let's bring in Caitlin Huey-Burns and Sean Sullivan. Caitlin is a CBSN political reporter, and Sean is a CBSN political contributor and political reporter for The Washington Post. Welcome to both of you. Caitlin, I want to start with you and what this poll says about voters' second choices, because this is so interesting. When you actually combine first and second choices, Senator Warren jumps in front of Joe Biden. So what does that tell you?
It's really interesting, especially as we've seen Warren's slow but steady rise. We've been seeing more and more supporters of her saying that she can defeat Donald Trump, but also those who are supporting other candidates taking a look at Elizabeth Warren. So it shows a little bit of some depth or potential for her to grow her campaign. It also fits into what our CBS News Battleground Tracker poll had found, that she was the second choice for an increasing number of candidates. So this is something the campaign has been trying to work on, to message to voters outside of their natural constituency and towards others. And we saw in our poll, too, she had started to take away votes from Kamala Harris.
Right. And Sean,
support,
right, support.
No votes yet.
So, Sean, the poll also shows only 9% of voters have definitely made up their mind about a candidate. Is that a sign of how far we are from 2020, or that candidates haven't pulled ahead yet?
It's more the latter, it seems, that we still have a race that is really, really wide open, and that should give hope to candidates who are not necessarily in the top tier right now. And a lot of campaigns and campaign advisors I'll talk to look at this race and they say, look, this is a situation where if a campaign catches fire, gets hot, builds a following in December even, or perhaps even early January, then that is something that could propel them further into this race and perhaps even toward winning the nomination. So it does look really, really wide open right now. I mean, when you look at most polls in this contest, what you're seeing is a little bit of a separation. You're seeing Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, and Bernie Sanders at the top of almost all of these recent polls. And then you're seeing a big drop off, and then you're seeing the rest of the candidates. But given how few voters have said, look, I am locked into voting for this candidate, if you are a Pete Buttigieg, if you are a Kamala Harris, if you are a Cory Booker, you've got to look at the situation and say, look, there's still time. I can still make my case to these voters, and a lot of them haven't fully locked themselves into a decision, so I could potentially be the nominee of this party. So
speaking of Kamala Harris, Caitlin, an Iowa caucus poll done by Senator Kamala Harris's chief pollster shows her in sixth place in the early states. So how is that affecting her campaign strategy?
Right, and this comes after she spent several days in Iowa last month on a bus tour that was very well publicized, and it kind of an admission in and of itself that she needed to spend more time in the state. She has been criticized for not having as robust of a ground game there and in other early states as some of these other candidates like Elizabeth Warren or even a Cory Booker. And it was notable in the last debate, she took a very different approach. Remember, in the first couple of debates, she was very critical of Joe Biden. In this past debate, we saw her take a more positive approach to a lot of things. So this is certainly something the campaign is thinking about, or they have to be thinking about, because she has faltered in the polls. She spent a lot of time on her campaign trail fundraising, raising money, but her poll numbers have not kept up with that.
Right. She clearly took aim at the last debate, not at Joe Biden, but at President Trump. It seemed to be very much a strategy shift. So, Sean, Senator Harris is not the only candidate focusing on fundraising. Your reporting from this week says presidential hopefuls are making a dash for cash, seeking money to sustain their campaigns and, quote, avoid a death spiral. Could you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, we're in a really critical phase of the money chase right now. We're about to hit a deadline at the end of September, which is the end of the third quarter fundraising period. And historically, this has been a very difficult and slow period for candidates to raise money. Why is that? Well, a lot of donors are on vacation in July and August. They're tuned out of politics. They're not necessarily engaged the way they are the rest of the year. And so it puts a lot of pressure on September and late September particularly. How much money can these candidates raise? raise. And so you're seeing Senator Harris, Vice President Biden, and Mayor Buttigieg, who are relying on large donors. You're seeing them hold a lot of fundraisers in the next week or so. They're crisscrossing the country. They're making time to raise money. And then you look at Senator Sanders and Senator Warren, who are more focused on online donations and smaller contributions. They're also revving up their money operations. And the reality is this is all going to be public in a few weeks. We're all going to be able to see how much money these candidates have raised and how much they've spent. And that tells us two things, not just one, how prepared they are for this next few months, which is going to be crucial, how much money they're going to have for TV ads, radio ads, how much money they're going to have to pay staff. But it also tells us how much enthusiasm there is for these candidates, because candidates who are generating enthusiasm, who are attracting voters, they're going to raise more money. They're going to get more donations. That's just the way it works. And so we'll get a snapshot of where the energy is, how much enthusiasm each of these candidates has behind them. And so these candidates are rushing at this point to make sure that they have a good or at least decent showing at the end of this month.
Sean, we only have about a minute left, but very quickly, you also have new reporting on Bernie Sanders' team in Iowa. What can you tell us about that?
Well, he recently parted ways with his political director in Iowa. This was not something that the campaign announced. They let her go sometime in recent weeks in the late summer. And why is this significant? Well, we're seeing this pattern emerge in other early states as well. In New Hampshire, Senator Sanders had a campaign shakeup there. So while we are, not to the final weeks of the campaign, we are pretty deep into the campaign, and it's significant anytime a campaign is reshuffling its leadership, let alone reshuffling its senior leadership in states as important as New Hampshire and Iowa, which of course are the first two states to vote. So this is something to keep an eye on as we watch and report on Senator Sanders' campaign.
Yeah, certainly notable. All right, Caitlin, Huey-Burns and Sean Sullivan, thank you both very much.